Hey everybody. I don't have the experience, obviously, of Gary Keane and Dermot, so I'm here to kind of talk about it from my perspective of a background in community work and also now working in national politics on how we interact between local and central. From my point of view, I've kind of consistently raised the issue since I got involved politically in terms of political engagement and a general sense of apathy with Irish politics. And I always say democracy is about far more than turning up in a polling booth once every 5 years or so. And we don't really encourage active democracy on a day-to-day basis in this country. In fact, we actively discourage it, I would say. I know my background in the community sector showed me that even when we could get together groups of really motivated and engaged community representatives and citizens that wanted to be involved, it very quickly fizzled out because you hit that roadblock where the permanent civil servants are telling you that things are always going to be this way and there's nobody listening to you, essentially. So it's very hard to motivate people and keep them encouraged in being involved in things when they sense that their voice is not really relevant when it comes to decision making or changes that affect them personally. We've a huge problem. I always say we've a huge problem with political engagement from a very young age, or political education, sorry, from a very young age in this country. We don't really educate our children in schools properly about our democratic systems, our systems of government. We have the CSP curriculum, but it's hugely flawed. There's also not enough time given over to it in general. But I think if you ask anybody, and I mean, when I'm in a canvass, the amount of people that will say to you, "Oh, sure, you're running for the locals," or "You're running for..." There's a general lack of understanding of the difference between local elections and general elections and what it means and how differently things work. And a huge problem with that is because we have such a clientelist system of politics in Ireland where people go to their national legislators to talk about the pothole or the ramps in their local housing estate. There's a sense of trying to bypass local government because local government is seen as kind of ineffective, and I don't mean that in any disrespect to anybody taking part in it, but there is that general sense that it is really a talking shop, and if you want something done, you go to your local TD who's going to be able to throw in the PQs or harass the minister for you. And in that sense, we're abdicating responsibility for our local government, and we're losing out because of that. We have never properly devolved power to our local government system. It has always been really a talking shop as opposed to a democratic function of our system. It spurs people to ask them, what's the point? What's the point in engaging? And when people say, what's the point in engaging, it leads to what I think we're seeing now is that general sense of mistrust in politics, in Irish politics in general, and in Irish public life in general. There's I think we'd all be aware of the attitude of, sure, they're all in it for the money, or the corruption element of it, and people don't have a great sense of trust in our political system, and it's something that the Social Democrats, it's one of the main reasons we formed as well, to try and combat that, because when people don't trust our political system, it does create problems in society, problems that snowball and become much bigger problems. And like that sense of apathy, and I use the word apathy very carefully because it's not saying that people don't get out and vote, and I always rail against the fact that it's thrown at you that young people don't vote and don't hinge your electoral prospects on hoping the young people come out, because young people do, and they care deeply. But the problem is, caring deeply is not translating into hearing, having your voice heard and feeling that you can really affect change. As I say, when I was in the community sector, we were constantly coming up against the wall of the permanent elected officials. I believe, had there been a directly elected mayor of Dublin, there would be some kind of system, and this is me being idealistic and hoping for the blue sky thinking, but there would be some kind of system whereby local areas would have a feed-through system to a directly elected mayor where those views are taken on board, whereas at the moment we have this ludicrous system of 4 local authorities managing our capital city in a very disjointed way. And I think, in fairness, I think the reason behind that was probably to reflect Keane's point about people on the ground locally are best placed to know about the issues affecting them. But disjointing up local governance in the way it was done was not the way to go about that. Instead of that, it could have been, like Catherine Murphy would be very vocal about town councils and how effective she believed they were. And a system where town councils pick up that local vital information and feed it through to a centralised system, which then one person, has responsibility, but more importantly has accountability for. Where they're forced to ask questions, where they're forced to recognise what's being said to them, and if they're not recognising and reacting to what's being said, that we have an opportunity to change that system and to boot them out of office and get somebody new in. And unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have that. I listened yesterday to the Pat Kenny show, I think it was, where Owen Keegan was on. And he was responding to the comments from that housing advisor who had said that the homelessness crisis in Dublin is no big deal, we should get over it. And I was glad to hear Owen Keegan say that no, we shouldn't get over it, that we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. But at the same time, he made the point that it was in the context of a conversation about the traffic on the quays being rerouted up through Stony Batter, and gentrified Stony Batter, as he called it. But he made the point about there always having to be losers, and people need to suck it up and accept that there's always going to be losers. But I contend that in a situation where you'd have a directly elected mayor, where people genuinely feel their voices have been heard, their concerns addressed or listened to, that cohort of losers would be far less and actually wouldn't feel, you know, put out or put upon. Tara referenced Keane's point there in relation to communities not accepting things that are imposed on them. So if the people, for example, using this Stony Batter example, if those people felt that their concerns were legitimately being listened to, advocated for in the appropriate circles, but then also used to feed into the process, and yes, it may not mean a change to the eventual outcome, but it would mean that they've had an input into it and therefore are less likely to feel as losers in the system. I thought it was very flippant of Owen Keegan yesterday to just show people lose, get over it. 40% of the population in Ireland is based in Dublin. So to have a system of local government in Dublin that doesn't work cohesively not only disadvantages Dublin and the surrounding hinterlands, it disadvantages the entire country. I mean, like anybody who's watching, thankfully it's coming to an end now, who's watching the city centre being uprooted for the last number of years while they try and join up two Lewis lines that should have been joined up from day one, will tell you that it was absolutely mental, that there was no proper cohesive strategic planning for a capital city, and that happened because we don't have somebody who is taking charge of the cityscape as a whole and looking at it strategically with a long-term view to what will work, because what works for the city works for the rest of the country, and you can't argue against that. There's the tradition of people, say, because of the clientelist approach, we have that tradition of people looking to central government for solutions rather than local government. And that creates problems not just for local government in the sense that it renders it somewhat ineffective. It also presents the same problem for central government in that we have situations where, I mean, if you watch topical issues in the Dáil on any given day, you'll find that 3 out of 4 topical issues are very local issues. It'll be somebody asking about the ramps on the local road, or generally speaking, it's not really given over to national issues or issues of national concern. And I feel very strongly that the Dáil is a place for issues of national concern and not for the local glorified county councillor, essentially, who's posing as a TD to try and raise issues that he thinks are going to get him votes in the bag for the next election. Again, using the example of the Dáil, Tara referenced the fact that a motion passed at the voting block on Thursday. It was a motion the Rural Independent Group had put forward at private members' business this week. It was predominantly around the Cork City and Council boundary issue that seems to be causing a lot of trouble down in Cork, and I won't profess to know a huge amount about that. But one of the points in it was for a directly elected mayor of Dublin. Now that vote passed because Fine Gael didn't muster the numbers in time. But it's the third such vote we've had in roughly 12 months where this issue has been in a motion and has passed. With a Green Party bill and a Fianna Fáil bill both in the same week. They were both passed through for second reading. But the reality of the situation is at the moment that means very little. I think if anybody remembers, what was the bill now, where Howlin, I think it was a Labour Party bill that passed through, and Michael Noonan very flippantly on media the next day discounted the vote. It was the AIB share sale. Discounted the fact that the vote had happened and said, sure, doesn't really mean anything. It's a problem when all votes don't mean anything, and the fact that a motion on this issue has been passed by the Parliament 3 times in the last year, and it doesn't mean anything, I think that's a real problem that we need to be looking at. But I suppose, just to wrap up, I thought Kate O'Connell, actually, and I never thought I'd be quoting the Fine Gael, but Kate O'Connell in this week's Oireachtas Committee on the 8th made a really good point when she was talking about the issue of the 8th, and obviously there was the opposing views, but she made the point about to people looking in, she urged them to pay attention to the people that they're electing to national parliament. And she she pleaded with people to the camera to really make the choice between national legislators and local politicians. Because, as she said, electing somebody because they fixed a pothole down the road is the person who's going to be sitting in a room making a decision about your healthcare or whatever the issue is. So we have to start making the distinction between local politics and national politics. And I believe that a great way to do that is to have a directly elected mayor that can be representative, that can be held to account. And I believe that that would give us not only democracy, but democracy that I believe should be representative, passionate and engaging in such a way that we have people actively involved on a day-to-day basis in the politics of their area, their community, their city and their county. And that to me is real democracy, not once every 5 years. Thank you.